In the last talk, I mentioned a book that you recommended to me, Collision with the Infinite, by a woman called Susan Segal. And she has a non-dual experience, an opening, I think you could say, or an awakening. Um, and she goes to a specialist who thinks she's ill. And
She sees lots of people, doesn't
yeah,
she? Because she's trying to understand what's happened to her. Yeah, I remember that one of the people she went to was a great scholar of things spiritual. And after a while of talking to her, he realised that she knew what the scriptures said or the texts from the great masters, but he didn't actually know what this was about. You get pundits. I guess it's, we can have interest in all sorts of areas, and some people get very interested in this on an intellectual level, and they study what Ramana Maharshi said or this discipline said, and then they get affiliated with this group or that group, and then personality is showing itself again because this is right and that's wrong. And in fact, the only way you're going to find out when I say right and wrong, I'm really talking about what is true according to this. And the only way you're going to find out what's true according to this is to experience it and find it yourself in the end. If the ground is not prepared, it can be extremely shocking. It can be full of fear if there's things in the past, in the residue of the story. There's all sorts of responses one can have. And there's something that wants to know, where am I? What is this? And it helps to have people who know this describing it. And I guess in these videos, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to sort of lay out the territory of this so that somebody can see it and say, oh, yeah, because I know that for myself when I've read something that has chimed with my experience. It's like, so I'm not going, before the shift, so I'm not going mad. This is actually good. Because from the world's point of view, a lot of this looks bad. This brings us on to the subject of disassociation, which is one of the things that Suzanne Segal had leveled at her, that she was sick. And then what she was experiencing was a psychological malady, which is called disassociation. It would be good to have the definition of this, so we've looked it up, so if you could read it out for us.
Okay. Disassociation is a psychological experience in which people feel disconnected from their sensory experience, sense of self or personal history. When people are disassociating, they disconnect from their surroundings, which can stop the trauma, memories, and lower fear, anxiety, and shame. Disassociation can happen during the trauma or later on when thinking about or being reminded of the trauma.
Okay, so there's a few things in that. So first of all, a good way to understand it is to think of someone who's, say, been, well, an obvious case we hear a lot about is victims of abuse. So the trauma of this abuse is so bad to the system that the system naturally has a way of dealing with it. So this is just nature happening, and it deals with it by disassociating from feeling. If one can extricate oneself from that experience, so it's happening physically, but somehow the sensory apparatus, the sense of self, is disassociated from it, then the impact it has on the system is lessened. So it's actually a self-protective mechanism.
My sister-in-law died shockingly, and young and traumatically. And about a year after, I said to my mum, I think the shock's wearing off.
Yeah.
And mum said, why do you say that? And I said, because I'm starting to feel more.
Yeah.
And there was a disassociation there, and it's a natural, again, as you say.
Yeah. So it comes back, you can see the common denominator is feeling and one's ability to feel. And can you read me that first quote again?
Sure. Dissociation is a psychological experience in which people feel disconnected from their sensory experience, sense of self, or personal history.
There's actually three things there, and I think they're very different. One is about being cut off from your sensory experience, and the other two were a disassociation from a sense of self and a personal history. Now, for me, that they're two different sections, and so you could say in some ways that the experience waking up from the outside can look like disassociation. I'm going to explain to you why it's not. So first of all, let's pick those second two. It looks like disassociation because, as you know, I talk a lot about a dropping of personal history and a sense of personal self. Now, if you look at any real spiritual endeavour, it all comes back to the common theme is, what is the self? Is there a self? Am I the self? So the whole cornerstone of this is going beyond the self. If you by the self you mean the personality, and going beyond one's identity and personal history.
Are you sure you don't have this dissociated personality disorder?
The reason I would say that this isn't that is because of the first one of the three, which was a dissociation from sensory experience. So There is no disassociation from sensory experience here. And more than that, I would say there is an opening to sensory experience and to feelings. And you know, one of the four aspects of being that I talk about is full feeling engagement with life. So if disassociation is linked with cutting off from feeling, this is where there's this vital difference. This is the opposite of that. So the question arises, is being disassociated from a sense of personal history or self a negative thing? Now, in this inquiry, it is the fruition. It's not a negative thing. But from a psychologist's point of view, they may look at me and think he's deluded and disassociated because he feels that he's unidentified with his past and his identity, and they would say, well, that's who he is. There is a kind of sense of identity that arises to some extent. I know that there is a being called Jez that is lived, that has a shape and a look and a sound and certain preferences and likes and dislikes. So I am not discounting any of that. For me, all of that is the play of life. And it's beautiful, just as way as the manifestation of Matthew or anyone is beautiful, right? But there is a difference, and it's the identification with it. I don't align myself that is who I am. I know that is something that's arising. It's a very strange thing, and even saying it sounds strange. But that is the difference. And as you can see, there's great joy in that, because that identification in terms of the absolute, it's a mistake. It's a misidentification. Because as children in natural state, we don't even have an identity. But if you would say we did, our identification is with the absolute, right? So for me, the natural state is to be identified as the everything. And the non-natural state is to be identified as this thing, this name, this I, this me. So from this perspective, it's not a negative. But from the world's view, it is a negative. And that's because the world's view is the personality's view. The world's view is not a spiritual view. It's not a view from beyond personality. It's a view from personality. So of course, they're going to turn it into a malady, into a dysfunctional thing.